Doing great, Deb.
Hey, it's raining out there.
It is. As we are shooting this today, we're getting some rain, which is much needed.
Much needed. And also, if you want to know about the market and any updates, watch us on Channel 26, where we air on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6:30 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday at 9 a.m.
Set your DVRs.
Yes, it's been exciting. So we have a special guest that you've brought in today. Would you like to introduce our
Certainly,
guest?
yeah. Well, we're entering tax season, and we like to bring folks, updates on what's happening in the area of taxes, taxation, planning. And so a friend of mine, Shay Pereira, who's a CPA, has joined us today. Shay is with Tax Professional Associates.
That's right.
And so you're just now getting heated up. We talked the other day on the phone, and things are starting, people are starting to bring in their returns,
right.
and you're getting ready for that April 15th deadline.
Yeah, it's creeping up on us very quickly, and then this rain's not helping too much, so everyone does want to go outside.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time to spend with us, because I know you're busy.
Yeah.
But we like to bring folks updates about what they might consider as they look to put together taxes for this year, but also some planning as well. So perhaps you can just start off and give us a little bit of your background. You're a CPA.
Right.
So how long you been in the business? How'd you get into that?
Right. So I've been a CPA for about 4 years now. I joined my dad. It's his company, so he's been practicing for about 25 years or so. There's 6 of us altogether, so 4 accountants and 2 assistants. Prior to that, I worked at Stanford. I did research management. I did managing federal grants and private contracts for computer science specifically, so a lot of Google and all that, those kind of people. And before that, I was at Applied Materials, and I was at school. So
it's a family business, but what is it that interested you in taxation and took you down that path?
Yeah, so my dad's been pulling at me for the last, I would say, at least 5 to 6 years, and so he's been drawing me to come, and eventually I said, okay, fine. And I've been very happy that I've done it, because it's a transition from working somewhere where you're sort of a cog in the wheel to sort of running your own, and as well providing value to people and actually seeing how that develops in them,
So CPA, what kind of special training or accreditation do you need for that?
Right, so there's 2 years requirements to be trained under another CPA who's actively licensed. And so I trained under Jim Watkins, who's one of my dad's partners. So he trained me. And then after that, you could apply for your license. You need to have a degree within the U.S., so you have to be an accredited degree. And so once you pass, there's a 4-part test. So once you pass all 4 parts, which is a little daunting, but once that's done, then you are accredited. And then there's audit, and there's other aspects of it that you go into too.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Great. Well, maybe tell us a little bit about what it is that really attracts you to being a CPA. You talked a little bit about making a difference for folks, but
a lot of people, when they come in and they see me, I do a lot of small businesses as well. They come to me and not really fully understanding what they're doing. I have people where they just like, here you go, help me.
They bring you the shoebox.
They bring you the shoebox. Sometimes now it's just a USB. I scanned it for you, so halfway done. And so it's like that. It's those are the we deal with a lot of individuals who are starting out, who don't really know, and then we also have people who've done TurboTax and so forth. A lot of times when they come to us, it's when it becomes too complicated for them, complicated, or they don't want to deal with it, and they just want a helping hand. And in most cases, people do it themselves, not knowing what they're doing, and definitely missing out on deductions, definitely doing it wrong, and getting caught in audits and stuff like that.
So what might be some important considerations that someone needs to ask a CPA? What kind of questions?
Yeah. So how many years they've been doing it? Right. It's a good question to ask. Also, it's good to go with a company where there's at least a few people, because when somebody gets sick, there's no one to back them up. So that does help. Also, the real main thing about finding a good CPA is if you get along with them. Right, this is like a marriage in a sense. Once you start seeing them every year, you know how each other's families are doing, and you grow together. Okay, so and if you don't get off on a good foot, or if it doesn't feel right, then you should look for someone that works out for both of you.
Well, you do know a lot of the personal information about people,
That's
right?
true, that's
you
true.
know, very
Yeah, so-
intimate details of their financial lives.
And you guide them, based on what's coming across, when they're retiring, how to really plan for that. So that trust is very important, and sometimes it develops, slowly. But if it's not ideal, then it doesn't work in some cases.
Agree,
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, good. So now we're in the midst of tax season, and so as you're working with folks, what are some of the things that people ought to be aware of with this current tax season?
Yeah, this is a tricky one this year because of, people call it Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. There's been a lot of new taxes, and couple things that changed and people felt immediately, both self-employed and people working with a W-2 job, is their self-employment tax went up. So in 2010, there was a moratorium of about 2% on their self-employment tax. This was part of the act enacted to bring more money into the economy and people to use. That expired as of 2013. So people's W-2 wages have gone down a little bit because they're paying more back to self-employment. It was always being taxed at that amount. It was just the moratorium expired. And so that's one thing. There's a number of new taxes. There's another Medicare surcharge. Once your combined income is over $250,000, there's about it's 0.9% Medicare surcharge. So that could be an additional tax on anything above the $250,000. So in this area, people, it's pretty common to have married couples over $250,000, fairly easy. And this is AGI, so this includes all the dividends and tax refunds and so forth. And also another thing is there's a new one called a net investment. There's a tax on that tax. So basically, there could be additional 3.8% on investment income that could be taxed. And so that one, people don't expect it because they're used to saying, okay, long-term capital gains, 15%. If I'm in a high tax bracket, 20%. So now it could be an additional 3.8% in certain people's.
So taxes are up in terms of some of the rates in some specific areas.
Yeah.
Are there things that people can do, though, in terms of planning to know that that's coming and perhaps some tax avoidance?
Right.
Not evasion, but
Right,
avoidance,
avoidance
which is
deferring.
deferring, which
Yeah.
is legal.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Right.
And so a lot of times, when they come to me, it's sort of past tense, so whatever happens, happens. So what we plan on is how to defer or find better sources of income in the future, right? In most cases, it's difficult when you have a W-2 to really find places to have deductions. So we look for ways to structure their income. So new income sources. So invest in dividends that are qualified, so it's a lower tax rate. Or look at real estate and invest in rentals and another source of lower tax income as well. It can be.
You hit the magic word,
Yeah.
real estate.
Yeah.
Our show is based on that. I'm
Right.
a real estate broker, and Todd does the financing, and
Right.
home financing. So what are the tax benefits of owning a home?
So right now, we still have that $250,000 exclusion, basically a married couple who own a home. If they live in it 2 out of the last 5 years, they could sell it and pocket basically $500,000 and not pay any federal tax on
That's
that.
huge.
It's a
That's
huge
still-
amount. It really is.
That's on capital gains.
On capital gains, exactly.
Right.
So
Isn't there an age restrict? You have to be a certain age for that, or
no, anybody could apply for it. I mean, if you're a younger person, but it's the time test. So you need to live in the property 2 out of the last 5 years. So it means you could rent it, and then first year you could live in it, rent it a few years, and then by the 5th year go back, and then be applicable to.
could you do that every 5 years?
Yes,
then?
yes.
If
We
you-
have clients who buy at auction, right? And they buy at a lower rate, and then they refinance, and they live in it in 2 years, and they flip it, and they keep doing that. And that's their source of income.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's for people who own their home. What about people who own real estate as an investment?
Right. Right. So it's a good thing as well. So one thing I was talking about earlier, source of income. We look at in this area. It's sometimes a little difficult to buy a house to live in, but we also look at other areas in California as well as investment income. Right. So in terms of an investment, the way we structure or we tell them is, let's just say you bought a property, say in Sacramento. Okay. There's something called depreciation. Basically, if we bought a property, say $600,000, we need to add a value to the building and a value to the land. Okay. Now the building, the IRS allows you to take a depreciation expense over a period of time. So if it's a residential, it's 27 and a half years. So basically, they're saying every year your building will break down a little bit, you know, not necessarily break down, but this is essentially a paper loss. Okay, it's an expense that you have to take, and it's tied to the year that occurs. It's not tied to, you know, if it actually breaks down. It's tied to the year. So if we, in our scenario, we say we bought a place for $600,000, we put a value to the building for $300, and we put a value to the land for $300. And if we say instead of 27 and a half, we'll say 30 years, just easy to map it out. Basically, you have a depreciation expense of $10,000 every year. Okay, so if you have profit of $10,000, there's an expense you have to take, and it will offset any income profit that you have, and you basically pocket that. Okay, so that's the upside of it. Mm-hmm. The downside is that if you sell it, you need to add what's called recapture, add all the depreciation back in. Mm-hmm. Okay, so on the gain and so. But what you're allowed to do, there's another thing called a 1031 exchange. Basically, instead of, you know, when you add the recapture, instead of selling it, you do a 1031, just basically selling the property and buying a like kind, very similar property. You know, if you're a house, buy another house of greater value than what you sold it for, and you defer the gain. You defer it and you push it off. Mm-hmm. So you keep pushing off, so you never pay those, you know, the gain, the tax on the gain. So it's a little bit of planning there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Clarification on it. Like for like property.
Yeah.
Does that mean there has to be a single family for a single family, or is it investment for investment property?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, it could be investment for investment. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily have to be a single home for a single home. We have people who do, you know, they do well on a single home, and then they buy a duplex or a fourplex. You know, they at that point it's looking for cash flow. Mm-hmm. You know, so maximize the loan so it's as low as possible,
right.
and, you know, and get the cash flow.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we may have been a little quick in terms of cutting you off on some of the other benefits of taxation for home ownership.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps you could touch on those.
Right, and so the mortgage interest deduction, it's a big thing right now. I mean, it's always been the case for a while. You know, and
Now that's capped still at $1 million.
it's capped at $1 million. The primary, then you could get an equity line for additional $100,000.
Oh.
So the equity line, you need to use it for creating value in the house. So,
Is that
yeah.
$1 million worth of interest, not $1 million on the property?
No, on the loan, on the value of the loan.
Oh,
Loan
okay.
value. So you could get, and it doesn't have to be in one property. You could have two properties, but the total loan value can't exceed $1 million to get the deduction.
So I
Okay.
could have a primary residence and a vacation home, say up at Tahoe,
Yep.
and the combined value of those, I can write off the interest on both of
You
those.
write the interest as well as the property tax on both of those. Okay. So there is value in getting a second home and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then, of course, property taxes are deductible.
Property tax is deductible. You know, a lot of cases around here we have parents who are a little bit elderly. So in some cases we have clients who have houses for them, and they're not paying any, you know, mortgage or something. So they take the deduction because it's all in their name. They're the one who bought it and so forth. So there's a benefit right there too. You know.
Right. And I think Debbie may have alluded to earlier the exclusion in terms of age, if you to be able to keep your property taxes if you sell a property and move perhaps to another area.
Yeah. So so there's a couple things, and it's important with what's called when you inherit properties as well. So let's start with, in the case of, let's say you received a property that you've been inherited from your parents or so forth. There is a law where the basis, basically what they paid for it, will transfer to the children. Okay, so let's just say they bought the property a long time ago, say, 30 years ago for $200,000, and now it's worth, say, $1 million. When the children receive it, their basis is $200,000, and the property tax is valued on if it's fair market value, in that case, it's on that. So the $200,000 is what they'll be.
So they get to keep the existing tax base that their parents had on there. So it's the parent-to-child exclusion on property taxes.
Yeah. So the parent-to-child is very important. But when it comes to other people, in case we had another case where the brother and sister, they passed away. One passed away, and they had a living trust and passed over the asset to the other person. In that case, the assessor came and reassessed them at the fair market value the day they passed.
Sibling to sibling is not exempt.
It's not, exactly. So the one that is exempt is from parent to child. So issues that can occur is if there's multiple owners of a property received from the parent. And so if one sells it to the other, one's basis, one child's basis will be at the lower rate. Then when he sells it, sell it from the second sister or brother to the same person, that portion could be reevaluated, reassessed at the current market value. So it gets a little tricky sometimes, but with a little bit of planning, you could be aware that these things occur.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Great. And then also for folks perhaps who are retiring, moving to an area or have a property with a low tax basis, in some instances they can transfer that low tax base to a new home if they downsize, perhaps.
Exactly, they can too. In most cases, they can.
Good point. Good point. So let's see. We talked about family limited partnerships.
Yeah. So there's different ways to pass stuff over to individuals as well. Put into LLC. People probably heard of, have a number of investment properties and put into an LLC. The importance of something like that is really liability protection. Everyone will say, well, why don't I just get a liability policy, umbrella policy, and protect everything? It doesn't protect everything, so that's the case. And so putting in this entity will sort of insulate you from things that not protected by that liability protection. And so what individual could sue somebody for is what they put into the entity. So if they start an entity with $1,000, they can sue for the $1,000. Issues that occur with that is that you need to understand that if you have a loan with a mortgage company, they may have an issue with you transferring into an LLC just because the ownership technically changes slightly. Even though you might be the owner of the LLC, but there could be other owners and the ownership may be an issue too. Yeah.
That does get a little complicated.
It does. It can. It can.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of things that people use right now is a living trust. It's very common. One of the better things to do.
That's what you would recommend?
I would definitely recommend. I mean, the LLC is really good for if you're really planning on with investment, trying to build up a portfolio of properties to use as retirement income for cash loans. So those LLCs will be ideal. You just got to be a little weary about the loans, and if you have loans. So anybody who has it bought straight out could put it into there and protect themselves. That's what I would recommend for them. Now, in a lot of cases around here, it's just one person, and husband and wife will have a house, maybe a second house at most. A lot of them should put it into a living trust to avoid probate. That's one thing, and it makes it very clean for the beneficiaries to receive the properties. The one thing that's very important to realize, and it's very good with investment income, if a parent passes away, this does apply if your property is not a living trust or if it's just a will, everyone gets this thing called stepped up basis. Okay, so what it is basically when, let's just say, the parents pass away, they have a living trust, and they give it to their one son. Okay, what happens is if they bought that property, say a long time ago for $100,000, and the day that they pass away, it's worth say 1.1. You have $1 million in gain, right? So what happens is that when they pass away, they get this thing called stepped up basis. Basically, the child's basis, not for tax purposes, but for calculating if they sell the property, property tax purposes. If their basis is not the $100,000 that the parents bought it for, it's a fair market value of the day that the person passes away. Okay, so that fair market value could be 1.1, the same value. So all that $1 million gain disappears.
Wow.
They don't have to pay tax. They could turn around the next day and sell it, right? Or they can hold on to it. They'll keep the property tax basis as what their parents had. So they have now $1 million assets that they don't have to pay tax on it, and their property tax is lower.
Wow.
So for investment, it's a good method for really planning.
Well,
yeah.
I tell you, it's a complicated
Can be.
world out there,
Can be, yeah.
and you certainly know your business.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine anyone not getting professional advice
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
on taxes, both short-term basis, on a annual basis, and also long-term planning.
right.
You definitely need to have somebody,
It really will help them.
a CPA.
Yeah, that definitely will help
Well,
them.
you really know your business.
Yeah.
So
Well, Shay, yeah, I really appreciate the information and sharing that with folks, and it can be complex. So if folks have questions, how can they get in contact with you?
They could call me directly. My number is 408-481-0406, or they can email me at shay@taxprocompany.com.
Well, Shay, we want to thank you very much for watching, coming to our show, and here's a Valley Homes on TV T-shirt.
That's great.
So,
Thank
are
you.
you a golfer by any chance?
I'm really bad.
You're really bad.
I started.
There's something different.
This is going to make you really, really good.
I'll hold on to it for a while.
Hit the ball straight. It's the
Extra
show
love.
that
There we
does
go.
it.
That's great. Okay.
Shay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
very
you for
much for
having me.
taking the time
Thank
to
you.
come.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Shay.
Good seeing you.
Through the years, trends and styles may come and go, but the important things remain the same. Generation after generation, consistently there, creating moments and memories to last a lifetime. Like a true friend, the national parks have always been there for you, and now you can be there for them. Support the National Park Foundation and help protect America's treasured places.
First thing, Todd, I want to bring up economy heats up. Affordability is expected to take a hit in the next year as home prices and interest rates continue to rise. How do you feel about that?
Well, the affordability piece of the equation we're starting to see, and I know you see it every day with the number of people that are looking at property, right? When you have a listing, the number of people are coming through those open houses, the number of offers on those properties. So the demand is definitely there,
Right.
much greater than the supply, and that's pushing prices in an upward direction. So it's getting a little bit more expensive to own a home. Interest rate market here, actually in the short term, has been pretty stable. In fact, we've seen a little bit of dip here in the last few weeks. And there's still some uncertainty in the economy. Yeah, there's some signs that there's some health there, but the word I like to use is uncertainty. We had Shay Pereira, CPA, on with us here recently. And Shay talked about some of the changes in taxation. And those sort of things cause uncertainty in people's minds, and particularly about their plans for future investment. So that's kind of keeping some lid on increase in interest rates. So they're still real affordable right now, which is the good news.
Excuse me.
But there is some speculation as we go through the year, if we do see the economy start to heat up a little bit more, that we might see interest rates come up a little bit, go up a little bit higher. Again, we've been talking about this for the last several years. We've got to keep an eye on the unemployment rate. Under 6% is the Fed target, and inflation, 2% is the target there. Once we kind of hit those metrics, then we'll probably start to see some changes perhaps in Fed policy.
And I think that you're accurate when you talk about uncertainty. I do talk to buyers coming in open houses, and the job market seems to be stable.
Yes.
But and I do think we're at a point. It's been widely publicized that we're out of the bottom of the market, and
Yes.
it's just on the way up, and they don't see a dip or any kind of change other than maybe an upward pressure of pricing. So the market's strong right now.
It is, and I think we're also returning to more of a balanced or more normal sort of market when it comes to the inventory of properties that are for sale.
I would agree.
We don't have the distressed properties like we had before.
It's interesting. Here's another article. just a couple weeks ago in the San Jose Mercury News, talking about is now an opportune time to sell. And I think it's a big question in a lot of sellers' minds. Should I sell now or wait for the spring? And there's a lot of factors that go into deciding, you know, and of course, family planning, as Shay talked about. I'm sure you have to look at some tax consequences and what do you want for your family and planning as far as raising a family and what area you want to raise them at. But I don't think you can time it so well. I mean, it's been a good market, and it's going to remain a strong market.
Right.
And I think those decisions are a personal decision.
Well, right, and I know you talk to a lot of people who are considering selling their homes, and it's not always strictly the financial considerations that people have when they sell. That, you know, there are all sorts of life events. People have relocations, changes in family structures, you know, and other motivations that people have for selling.
I like that word, life events. Those are good.
Well, you know, life happens, right?
Life happens.
And we react to those changes as we go along.
Yep.
So.
Okay, so let's go into some numbers.
Sure.
Let's look at what the market's doing. Let me give you some statistics. Back in December of 2012, we had an average single-family price in Milpitas of $711,000 and a median price of $660,000. And now December 2013. That's my most recent statistics. It's interesting. There's not a lot of change in the average price. It's $707,000. But what's bumped up is the median price. That's up to $730,000. And I think we're going to see that rise even a little bit more in the next few months.
Do you think that what do you think's behind that, driving the increase in the median price?
I don't know. I'm not really certain. Other than I guess it's maybe limited market. There's very few. Inventory is tighter now than it was before, so that would
so
be
with fewer sales, that tends to drive that number up.
Okay. And also we have a lot of upper end. You know, we got homes over $1 million in Milpitas, and they're selling. So that's definitely driving that price up.
Okay.
So condos are continuing to rise. This is unbelievable. December 2012, $344,000 for average price. Median price $332,000. That's now shifted to $517,000 for average price and $521,000 for a median price. I did not expect.
Those have been some dramatic changes, particularly in the condominium market.
Yes, and particularly we've got so much building going on in the city. That I would have thought that would have flooded the market and put more supply out there and maybe kept the prices stable, but that's not the case. What it goes to show you is that you still have young family. I have a family that I was working with just today, young married couple, and they have a couple children looking at a condominium, $400,000. So that's what's affordable, and that's what they're getting into, and they appreciate having that.
Well, I think the other thing it does is it provides evidence how great of a place Milpitas is to live. Folks want to live here. We've got great schools, shopping, real convenient location here in Silicon Valley to all the amenities that you want. Great parks. Exactly.
Great services,
Yeah. Who wouldn't want to live in Milpitas?
Well, we're being flagged down, so we could go on and on. So, Todd, thanks a lot again for everything you do and making this show happen. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll continue to do this. And
we enjoy doing it.
Yep. So we'll see you folks later. Thank you for watching Valley Homes on TV.